Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well. So I just binge watched all of season two of Raising Dion. So
Ooh.
good. But I love that you're one of Hollywood's nicest guys. And here you are playing a guy who's not very likable, I have to say. Sorry. But you look like you're having so much fun playing him, especially the Gandalf scene. No spoilers.
Oh yeah.
So tell everyone about the journey that Pat goes on this season.
It's a really fun one. Obviously at the end of season one, he had burned a lot of bridges and hurt a lot of people that he cared about the most. And so the last 2 years between season one and season two, he's just kind of been alone, trying to start over. And he's finally come back to kind of face the music, so to speak, and try to help. He saw the crooked energy on the news, and he knows that it's not him anymore. So he wants to help, but now he has to. Well, he's got a lot of explaining to do.
Yes, that's for sure an understatement. So, what
Yeah.
are you excited for the fans to see this season?
I'm excited. I'm excited for them for the whole journey. I'm excited for them to see this kind of. It feels like Raising Dion 2.0. It feels updated in almost every way. I think the special effects are even more complicated and beautiful and amazing. And I think I think in terms of my character, I'm excited to see. I feel like every person will have a different journey with how they feel about Pat this time around. Do
Yes.
they completely trust him right away? Are they a little bit tentative since he did so much lying and bad things in the first season? And I think Carol and the writers really did a great job of playing with that and maybe wanting to believe Pat, but not knowing for sure. And because at the end of the day, even though the cricket energy isn't with Pat anymore, he still is Pat in all of his flaws and some of his more toxic traits, I'll say.
Yes. Yes. We definitely get to see that play out on screen. So, what were
Yeah.
some of your favorite moments to play this season?
I think my favorite moments to play, even though they were few and far between, were when I got to see Alicia or Josiah again, and we had so much fun the first season, and now I guess if you do all the terrible things that Pat did, it's a bit of a vibe killer. So it was fun to see them, and also fun to sort of sit in that place of, I know I've done some terrible things, but I hope that you can believe me again. And I think for Pat, that's a bit more accelerated than it would be for Jason. I think he's like, I said I'm sorry already. Can we?
Yeah.
It wasn't my
Yeah.
fault. I'm also a bit of a victim here, which none of those things help in the healing process. So he's in his own way a couple of times in this season.
Yes. And I love that they call him out on it too,
Yes,
every
exactly.
time. It's
Exactly. Yeah.
amazing.
Especially
So,
Suzanne. She's not taking any of it.
right, right. I was going to say, I loved your interplay with Jasmine Simon this season.
Oh yeah. She has no room for good Pat.
No.
She's yeah, she can hold a grudge.
So tell me about working with her, but also Alicia.
I mean, this cast in general is full of just the loveliest people on the planet, and Jasmine is so great, and her son and my daughter are real good friends, and they send each other little videos saying hi to each other. So that was really fun. It was fun to get them together in person a couple of times. But I love them so much, and it's fun because we have so much fun off camera and we like each other so much. And then when we have to start a scene, I'm still trying to ingratiate myself to them, and they have to put up this wall of, this is Pat who did what Pat did. And it's fun to sort of watch them flip that switch.
So, what were some of the fan reactions to Pat?
Oh my gosh. I think it was probably my favorite thing last season was looking on Twitter and seeing people react to the moment where it's revealed that he's the crooked man. How many people were like, I was rooting for you, and then about equally the number of people were like, I knew something was off with that guy. And so it was fun because I feel like I think Pat certainly reminds me of a lot of people in my life, and I've allowed people in my life that maybe I shouldn't have, or I trusted people when I shouldn't have, or I was worried about people and I was right, or whatever it is. I feel like Pat's that kind of guy that you're like, should we invite him to the
Right.
is he gonna like cause a scene, or he was fine last time? So I like that dynamic, and I think that dynamic plays into this season a lot, where you now that you know what he's capable of for sure, it's even harder to kind of trust him. But maybe something in you says, no, I believe that he's a good guy, or maybe something in you says, nope, not buying it. Whatever it is, I think it's a fun journey.
Yeah, and that's a tough line to cross as an actor too, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really fun when I got the scenes. I knew that Pat was in for a tough road to potential redemption, especially as a guy who hasn't normally liked consequences or accountability or any of that. Is very quick to pass the buck. So it was interesting to have him have to sit in a cell, and I thought a lot about in between the visits, what he's just doing, puttering around that little glass room like an animal.
Reading the comics that he didn't approve of.
Yeah, reading second-rate comics.
Were you a fan of comics or superheroes growing up?
I was a fan of superheroes. I mean, Spider-Man was one of my favorites, I think, because he was like a teenager and he was kind of weird and he wasn't so polished. He was kind of like a little bit goofy, but also cool. And Green Lantern I liked a lot for some reason. I still don't know why. I think it just was what was around or what someone introduced me to. So I read a lot of Green Lantern. But I think, my love of comics or graphic novels goes all the way from like Archie and Casper to like the EC comic, like Vault of Horror and, Tales from the Crypt, all those kind of 50s comics. And so I loved it. I never was the kind of comic book guy who put it in the plastic and kept it. All my comics were always in a pile. I had no idea that was a thing that people did until I was much older.
Yeah. Same. I didn't know until I was in my 30s, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, everyone just had piles.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, little pile. Exactly.
Didn't cross our mind, and we didn't have the internet really, so
exactly.
used to know. And I love that Dennis Liu, who created the comics, he comes back and he directs 2 episodes for this season. That's amazing.
It was so great, especially because I think the first time Nicole and Pat see each other after the events of last season was in an episode that Dennis directed. So we had someone who was incredibly familiar with the characters, knew exactly what we would both be thinking and feeling, and we could all 3 sit down and have a conversation of what this would be like, what this would feel like for both of them.
Yeah. So tell me about some of the conversations you had with him about the character and about just this fully lived in world that he's created.
I mean, we've talked a lot about Pat because I think Dennis and I both see more of ourselves in Pat than we care to admit to the world. But, especially some of the pettier sides of Pat, the feeling left out, the feeling, the little, anger or whatever, the frustrations of the world not meeting your idea of what you thought it would be, or whatever it is, all of those, the jealousies, the things that we're not so proud of. And it's really nice to be able to talk to Dennis about all that stuff, Dennis is one of the loveliest, sweetest guys around. So it was really comforting in a certain way to be like, yeah, we all do have these little feelings that we're not proud of. And, and obviously we don't turn into big lightning men and do terrible things to the people around us. But it was nice to it's much nicer to have those kind of complicated conversations rather than just go, this is an evil character, or
Right.
whatever. Pat was never an evil character. He was
No.
angry and jealous, and maybe selfish and arrogant and all of those things, but very, I don't know if I can point to, yeah, I think he's just not, evil is hard to play. Like, it's an idea of like just twisted and dark and evil. And I always have found villains more interesting when they um, have a belief system that they think they're the hero in their own story.
Yeah, yeah. And I love it's beautifully explored. I don't know if I can talk about the scene where you talk about the crooked energy, how it's just you can feel it and it's drawn to you and it's inside you, but you have a choice.
Yeah, and I think that's where we see that for all of Pat's flaws, there is an element in him. He grew up, he was reading comics and he was going, I want to be Superman, I want to be Batman. That, no one wants
Yeah.
to be the bad guy. And so he saw what he felt on a visceral level what it was like to have those dark parts of yourself be sort of fed upon. And I mean, I remember as a kid, um, having certain, like, realizing at a certain point that I had friends who kind of fed into the good parts of me and the fun parts of me. And then I also had some people that I knew who would really kind of feed some of the negative things. And I was glad that I had enough of tools in my own brain to say, I think I need to step away from this. It's not making me feel good at the end of the day, to just sit somewhere and tear people down, like tear,
Yeah.
even though it was funny and fun, it just felt like, oh, do you tear me down when I'm out of earshot?
Yeah.
It just didn't feel nice or fun. So yeah, I love that scene where he's sort of warning little Braden and trying to say, don't let it take you. And you see that in that moment, you see this is what Pat had been dealing with, and he just didn't try hard enough, or he couldn't do it, or was too weak, or whatever. But I love that element that,
Yeah.
again, you see all these conflicting parts of this character.
And then you see it in Braden also, just the sadness, but also the crooked energy, so called. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he did such a great job. I mean,
Right.
a lot of times it's that sadness, where a lot of that sadness and that loneliness, where a lot of negative things can take the place, or a feeling of powerlessness, where you know someone says, "Oh, here's a shortcut to feeling powerful," and people
Hmm.
take it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've long championed female artists, female storytellers, Mariana Palka, of course, but also Jennifer Lee, Jennifer Fox, and now you have Carol Barbie. What was it like working with her?
She's awesome. She's just so incredible, and I talked to her about Pat's arc from the very beginning, before, like, I think right around the time that I got the part, she told me the whole thing. And then obviously I read all the scripts, but I just love the way that she lays in all of these sort of beautiful metaphors, in a way that doesn't feel like, bonking anyone over the head, but that everyone's complicated, and that, I love that Pat is a character that you can like and intensely dislike at the
Yes.
same time, or from one minute to another. I like that she plays with that, and I like that the good characters aren't just like perfect manifestations of people walking around being good and being perfect. That everyone has, this struggle within them, and I love that. I mean, I love that even watching Star Wars growing up, like the idea that we both have the potential to choose a side, and the easier but sort of weaker version is the evil side, and it's longer but more powerful eventually in the scheme of things to be a Jedi and be on the side.
Yes. And I love that that's mentioned in the show so often too.
Yeah, exactly. I know it's an interesting dynamic of Pat, that he obviously knows all the lore that he does, and he's going through that exact thing, and yet cannot seem to pull himself out of it in that first season. He's just in the middle of it.
Well, thank you so, so much for the art that you bring into the world, Jason. This was lovely. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
lovely
you.
day.
Thank you so much. You too. Have a great one.